So we do have audio here, so when you talk, try to project. Today's focus is going to be on National Lampoon's Vacation. So where would you like to start? No wrong answer.
Dad.
Clark?
Yeah.
All right, so what did you observe?
Well, in the beginning, I thought he was just like, an annoying dad going on a family trip. And then that appeared not to be true for many reasons, but some narcissistic tendencies.
So what do you mean? So there's two questions off of this. From your perspective, what are you identifying as narcissistic tendencies? And then the question to the larger group is, what does that even mean? But let's focus in on a scene perhaps first.
Well, he wouldn't listen to any suggestions from the wife. He was always right in whatever he decided to do.
And
I don't know if I can think of a scene.
There's one particular thing that makes me think exactly that was when obviously he didn't get the car that he wanted, and so then he just changed the salesperson's opinion to be his own when he's explaining to his wife, why you got that. So it was all his ideas.
Yeah. I mean, at the end, when he was cheating on the wife and he was talking to the kid, and the kid he asked the kid if he bought the story, and he was like, yeah, do you think Mom will? And I don't know, just assuming that he was right and just going with the story as if that was the truth.
Okay. So I want to introduce a clinical term here. This might come up in your shelf exam. It may not, but it's certainly something that I think has significant clinical application, and that is egocentrism. All right. Egocentrism, I think, would be an example of a narcissistic tendency. Right? Egocentrism is an incapacity for an individual, we'll name him Clark, to perceive a situation from no one other's perspective but their own. Right? So, by definition, the individual lacks empathy. They just don't understand how words or actions may be interpreted by other, whether it's Clark's wife, whether it's some other character in Vacation. So that's egocentrism. Egocentrism is normal. It's completely normal when age appropriate, right? And could you give me an example? Just a general example. Age appropriate egocentrism.
Someone who's 10 years old, everything's about me. My whole life revolves around me.
Mm-hmm. Very normal in children, right? Right. Children do believe, and they're right, that the world, in fact, revolves around them. But at some point, they realize that it doesn't. And that's when the progression from egocentrism to the development of other related traits such as empathy and compassion begin to develop. So we derail from the path of egocentrism, and we begin to establish empathy and then ultimately even compassion for others. If something happens in early childhood, that course may in fact change, and it may result in the individual, again, we'll name him Clark, continuing on that path forward with egocentrism, and at some point it's going to become age inappropriate. And when it does, it will pose risk for future mental illness, including but not limited to the narcissistic personality disorder. Right? So that's the general concept here. Clark Griswold is quite egocentric. By the way, so is George Costanza from this morning's commentary and discussion. But that's egocentrism. And I think everyone here can agree that even though the cutoff as to when it's normal versus abnormal is very fluid, we can establish that whenever that cutoff is, Clark does appear to be well beyond that threshold in his mid to late whatever. All right? Now, in its most egregious form, this could result in the narcissistic personality disorder, which is what? We kind of alluded to this morning. Kind of. We went through cluster A, cluster C. Here we are right in the middle now with that third cluster. And by the way, yes, narcissistic personality is one of those in our kind of reclassified system, our reorganization, does adhere to a cardinal trait, which is what?
The example I think that they use the textbook is the person that comes in and demands to be treated by the chief of surgery for their
We won't use the S word. We're not going to focus on any particular branch of medicine here. Right? Psychiatrists can be narcissists too. Wink, wink. Right? So
They're requesting to be operated on by.
understood. It's the general individual who believes they are special, and that therefore they can only be understood by someone as special as they are. So there is a related haughtiness and arrogance. That's it. Right? And then again, every DSM criteria that follows, examples of that cardinal trait. Is that Clark? Probably not. So, egocentrism, yes. Maybe even clinically significant egocentrism. But he does seem to fall short of what we would diagnose as the narcissistic personality disorder. All right? Let's say somebody did rule in, like you found them incredibly arrogant and incredibly haughty. And you thought that the answer is yes. It seems that they have reached that threshold, and you're about to review the actual diagnostic criteria. And I believe you need 5 out of a checklist, right? So 5 examples of that cardinal feature. Before we go there are about 5 things that we have to consistently consider before we actually peek at those diagnostic criteria. What are those 5 things?
Like other diagnosis that we should consider, or more?
So that's part of it, yeah.
I'm thinking about like the grandiose feature of like bipolar.
So that the condition is not better explained by a known or another mental disorder. True, yes, that's one.
But it's not related to substance use.
That is not due to the direct and physiologic effects of a substance, too.
The duration has to be.
Good. So it's stable over time. So we're not going to talk actual days or months or years, decades, but it's stable, right? We are who we are, for better or for worse, usually by early adulthood. That's what the DSM says anyway. Right? It's onset in early adulthood, right? And then it's not expected to change day in and day out. It's stable, right? Whether that personality is your personality or whether it's a personality disorder, same thing. Good. Next. 2 more.
Not due to a medical condition?
That's exactly right. Actually, no, 2 more after that. So we have rule-outs, right? So our differential includes underlying medical condition, substance use, and another mental disorder. So those are the 3 rule-outs. And then there's 3 other characteristics, right? One of which we have, stability. There's 2 more. I mentioned one this morning.
But yeah, like the other personality disorders has to have a significant negative impact on your life.
That's right. It's clinically significant, right? One more.
It's not triggered by like a specific event. Does that would go under stability?
It's true, but I wouldn't make that one of the top 6. That probably goes under stability. Yeah.
In multiple settings, like you can't
That's it.
change it.
It's pervasive. Yeah. I mean, if you act arrogant to me today, and I'm like thinking we have to diagnose you with a personality disorder. I don't know why an attending would do that, but let's say I wanted to. And I'm dying to diagnose you with a personality disorder. And when I get collateral information, I'm hearing from the people closest to you, they're a completely different person at home. I have to stop short. It may be just that you're an intense, albeit arrogant student while you're working, but that's not you. That's not your personality. So yes, pervasiveness. It must cross social situations. If it doesn't, it's not your personality, and therefore it's not a personality disorder. Those are the top 6. They have to apply to every diagnostic workup of a personality disorder. And if you check all 6 boxes, then you peek at those diagnostic criteria. That's the final step. Okay. Any of those apply here to Clark? So let's say you want to peek. You're thinking, might be something here. Any of those 6 jump out at you thinking, wait a minute, we might be onto something? Because once one rules in, especially when you look at the differential, that's going to actually cause you to consider that as a provisional diagnosis. So I want your commentary, your feedback on clinical significance, stability, and pervasiveness, but I'm also very interested in whether you think there's something else going on here clinically.
So like when I was watching, I first thought he was like hallucinating in a way. Like, so I consider like schizophrenia because the woman, like the model that he constantly saw, I'm like, how is this model continuing to occur? But later on in the movie, the wife actually saw her in the pool, so like, okay, he's not hallucinating. So that made me think of possibly like mania, due to one, like he seems very impulsive, especially with how he dealt with the grandma. He seems goal oriented, even though everything that he's gone through the trip, he still wants to get to California. So for that reason, I think bipolar 1 should be on the differential.
All right, so let's tackle this. Evidence of psychosis ruled out schizophrenia. Interesting. Harold Ramis is a genius, although he may have been better off consulting with you first before okaying this script. It looks like if there was a scene or two maybe that were left on that proverbial cutting room floor, and then nobody else saw Christy Brinkley's character. Wow, that might have been very interesting, very incredibly subtle, but a very interesting take on this all. Unfortunately, there are other people who see, quote, the model, end quote, and therefore this does not appear to be part of a psychotic system for the main character. But interesting idea.
What was the deal with that though, with her in the car? Like,
Yeah.
that wasn't real.
Was it?
What do you mean?
She was on the highway at least
Like
3
multiple
times.
times, yeah, right?
How's that?
She just happened to be on the highway next to him 3 times in the beautiful convertible. Listen, I think you were trying to tell us something with it.
Oh, wait. There was
He
a
just pictured himself in the car at one point.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
He pictured himself in the
Yeah.
car with her at one point.
Yes, he did. That was a dream sequence. Or, yeah.
Maybe something's going on with her and she's stalking him or something. I don't know.
Yes.
Again, interesting take. I want to leave this in the differential. I don't think this is what's happening here, but it is an interesting take. So, and again, it's opportunity to teach. So you mentioned the S word.
I was saying I don't think it's psychosis. I was considering mania.
I know. Well, we're gonna teach both of them.
Okay.
What is schizophrenia? So again, we're using these medical terms. I need to know now what you mean by schizophrenia. You meaning collective group
More than 6 months.
of.
At least positive symptoms. You need like hallucinations or delusions, disorganized speech,
Disorganized thoughts. And then
Disorganized thoughts and speech are the same thing.
Oh, and behavior.
Behavior.
And then negatives.
And negative symptoms, right? So, generally speaking, positive symptoms are the pathological presence of something that at baseline should not be there. All of which have been exemplified here, right? Positive symptoms of schizophrenia are due to higher/lower levels of blank, fill in neurotransmitter here, at the level of the blank track. So here we go. What's your neurotransmitter? Dopamine. Good. Nailed it. Too high or too low? Too high. Great. Okay. 2 for 2. Dopaminergic track. Oh, by the way, do you guys fill out any questionnaires on to the extent basic science is continuing to be discussed in clerkships? Because we're
That's in the eval.
It's in the eval.
I think so, yeah.
It's
All
at
right.
the end of clerkship.
Is it electronic or paper?
Electronic.
All right. Everyone, you better remember this. Is there a point where you can actually put in the?
There's
the
like comments that you can like put in.
Okay. You don't have to name the doc by name, but the sales service does this. What do you got? What's the meso limbic tract? Great. All right. Everybody's got that? Comes up on exams all the time. Right. The negative symptoms, the pathological absence of something that at baseline should be there, is due to too high/low. Fill in neurotransmitter here at the level of the blank track.
Too low.
Still dopamine.
Still dopamine. Mm-hmm.
Mesocortical.
That's it. Mesocortical. Okay. All right. Again, just keep that in mind for the shelf exam and your evals. All right. So that's the definition of schizophrenia itself. A diagnosis of exclusion. We're not going to go that far yet. We're going to have plenty of time to discuss aspects of psychosis in general, schizophrenia in particular, related to its being a diagnosis of exclusion. I heard mania. Okay, so and wow, Clark Griswold looks like he may actually fit here. So, what is mania?
Like sleepless, more than 7 sleepless nights, which he did fall asleep at the wheel.
All right, so the magic number is 7, right?
Goal-oriented, driven behavior.
Goal-oriented behavior, which kind of is Clark. I said it tongue-in-cheek.
Like pressured speech, disorganized thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Distractibility.
Easily.
Mm-hmm. Distractibility, perfect. All right, so we dig fast, right? 7 days or more, all right? Clinically significant. If the individual rules in for a manic episode, Clark Griswold may in fact be ruling in for a manic episode here, right? You need 5 total symptoms. 1 is an elevated, expansive, or irritable mood. There's some irritability here too, right? I think he actually drops the F-bomb, right? Again, it could be a dad thing, but we'll take some creative liberty here. What's the most likely diagnosis then?
Bipolar 1.
Bipolar 1. There are 3 other conditions to consider if this is true mania. What are they? All of which would take precedent over bipolar 1 if additional signs and symptoms were in fact revealed. The other way to say this is, what are the 3 mental health syndromes that can incorporate mania but not be bipolar 1?
The MDD with psychosis.
No.
Oh, schizophrenic.
Very close.
So
Affective.
Cisco? What? Good. Schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type. Yep. And that's really the only other mental disorder that exists where an individual may have a manic episode but not be bipolar 1. The other 2 syndromes are what? That is, they're not true mental disorders per se. Substance-induced, and that due to an underlying medical condition, which should always be number 1 and 1B on the tip of your tongue, right? So those are given. The real answer here is schizoaffective bipolar type. Right. Any evidence that Clark Griswold is schizoaffective and therefore not bipolar 1? The answer really is it depends if you want to go with your first conspiracy theory. Right.
Yeah, because he was in a car. He imagined himself that he was in a car with someone else. So there's that. I was even, I guess, going off on a tangent, just thinking, there was a scene when he was driving, he was like profusely sweating. So I was wondering, I don't know if he's like got dehydrated or hypoglycemic.
Hyponate treatment?
Yeah. So, but yeah, so that I think that would ruin possibly schizophrenia. Him dreaming that, hallucinating that he's in a car with her.
Interesting. Okay.
It's so funny that everyone thinks that she was hallucinated because I'm just like, oh, he's a narcissist. Like, he thinks he can get with her or whatever. Like, that's not true. And everyone's like, oh, she's not there.
She was at the same level of the highway, like 3 different times.
Yeah.
Is that just coincidence?
It's a movie. That's how movies work.
Nah.
You always run into people multiple times.
Again, an interesting concept. Yeah. Good. Well, at least it gives us an opportunity to talk about 2 disorders that you will absolutely, almost guaranteed, see on your shelf exam, as well as your clinicals during your psych rotation. All right. Anything else for Clark? There's one scene that I want to talk about that has him in it. You mentioned the profuse sweating. It's a scene where he actually demonstrates profuse sweating again. No?
I kind of thought it happened a lot. Like, I thought he was just sweaty. It was like summer. I don't know.
I want to talk a little bit about the desert scene after they crash the car.
Oh.
Right, because that brief scene, it's brief, and there really isn't much to it other than a window of opportunity to talk about delirium. Right? And I think it's important to recognize that scene being the first week of your psych rotation, especially on CL, because this is a condition that you're going to see more often than any other condition on a CL service. Right? So let's talk a little bit about Clark Griswold wandering in that desert and the delirium that he demonstrates. So delirium is a condition in psychiatry that is defined through what I refer to as the 3 C's, right? So there's 3 diagnostic criteria, all 3 of which begin with the letter C. So, what is the definition of delirium?
Confusion.
Confusion, right? So number 1, you have cognitive deficits, aka confusion, that are acute in onset and fluctuating in course, right? When they're not acute in onset, and when the course is linear and therefore does not fluctuate, that is not likely delirium. It can be chronic encephalopathy, but it could also be what?
Dementia.
Yeah. Right. So dementia. The other term currently used is major neurocognitive disorder. What differentiates dementia or major neurocognitive disorder from mild neurocognitive disorder?
IADLs.
Sorry?
Being able to IADLs.
Close. More specific.
Sorry, I think I was more so comparing MCI to dementia.
Well, MCI is the older term now replaced by mild neurocognitive disorder. So you're actually answering the correct question.
Yeah, your ability to perform activities such as like shopping, paying bills, transportation, like driving.
Good.
If you need assistance with that, that is dementia.
Perfect. So clinical significance is the easy way to remember that, right? And the examples of which you're right on. Mild neurocognitive disorder, the condition formerly referred to as MCI, mild cognitive impairment, is defined through it not being clinically significant. And that's almost unheard of in the DSM. The American Psychiatric Association identifies only 2 syndromes in the entire book defined through its not being clinically significant. Mild neurocognitive disorder is one of them. What's the other? And by the way, mild neurocognitive disorder is a name change. It was previously MCI, which is a more accurate diagnosis because to the extent that we're calling this a disorder, it's a misnomer. It's not a disorder because it's defined through not being clinically significant. That's an oxymoron, but it's one that was recently created with the latest revision of the DSM nonetheless. There's another condition that is literally defined by its not being clinically significant.
Why do I want to say adjustment disorder? But I feel like that's wrong.
I'd have to
You
check.
can have like functional impairment with that.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. The other one's hypomania,
Oh,
Oh,
right.
right? Hypomania deviates from mania both quantitatively and qualitatively. Quantitatively, the magic number is 7. 7 or more, we call it mania. Less than 7, we call it hypomania. Okay? It's got to be at least 4, but the bottom line is focus on that magic number of 7. In addition to that, hypomania is not clinically significant. So qualitatively, it's another condition. But thankfully, they don't call it hypomanic disorder because that would be another misnomer. Right. So by understanding that hypomania looks exactly like mania, but with that quantitative as well as qualitative differentiation, we can now begin to define other conditions, other disorders in the DSM that are considered to be the bipolar spectrum. In that chapter titled Bipolar and Related Disorders, what are those other related disorders now? We already mentioned bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymic disorder, right? Or cyclothymia. It's a better name because, again, you don't want to use the D word. Okay. Bipolar 2 is a condition in which a person has hypomania that alternates with major depressive episodes. And because major depressive episodes, by definition, are clinically significant, bipolar 2 is clinically significant. On the other hand, cyclothymia is not. Cyclothymia is a condition in which an individual with hypomania has alternating episodes with minor depressive disorder. So signs and symptoms of depression that don't meet full criteria. And that condition is usually not clinically significant because of that.
So then for that, would you necessarily need both a mood stabilizer to treat cyclothymia, or would it just be therapy?
I think general practice is that you start with therapy,
Okay.
and if therapy alone is not successful, then adding a mood stabilizer. Mhm. All right, so delirium. So yes, cognitive deficits. What are the other two C's? I mentioned one already, of course, by definition, acute in onset and fluctuating. And then what's the final C?
Consciousness. Is it consciousness?
Consciousness used to be in the DSM-4. It was removed and pretty much like merged with cognition, the first C.
Explained by a medical condition.
Yeah, exactly, right? So by that mere fact that that's now not an exclusionary criteria, but a criteria of inclusion, delirium is not a mental disorder at all. It's a behavioral manifestation of an underlying organic pathology, or organic here means another medical condition, or the effects of a substance. Okay? So it's the direct opposite of anything we've come to understand about mental illness, where you have to actually investigate and rule out those two. Now you have to investigate and rule in those two. So what are the mental disorders? Excuse me, the medical etiologies that can induce delirium? Infection.
Steroids.
So drugs. Steroids being a great example.
Acute changes in thyroid hormone, like thyroid storm versus like a mixed edema coma.
So thyroid. Yep.
Hypoxia.
Hypoxia. Good.
Electrolyte abnormality.
Good. Favorite Shakespeare? I love how you looked at her. Now we're gonna ask everybody in the room.
Okay.
Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare.
Is that Shakespeare?
I don't think that's Shakespeare.
I mean, I guess.
Pass.
I'll pass.
Romeo and Juliet's got a second vote.
Romeo and Juliet.
Third vote.
I pass.
Fourth vote.
I like Hamlet.
Hamlet. Hamlet.
I'm just standing.
Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. Macbeth.
Hamlet.
Hamlet.
Macbeth.
Macbeth.
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. All right, we got two right answers. Okay. It's Macbeth. Why in the world would a psychiatry attending want you to talk about Macbeth?
Psychotic characters.
Which one?
Ask the people if they're favorite.
Well, you guys turn on each other real fast.
I feel like that's all Shakespeare's though.
Defend your claim.
This is all you answer.
After assassinating the King of Scotland, both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have perceptual disturbances that are directly affecting their behavior. Initially at a banquet to celebrate becoming the new king, and also having to kill his best friend Banquo, because his best friend is the only one that could implicate him in the murder of the king. Macbeth sees the ghost of his dead friend at the head of the table. And if you read it closely and understand Shakespeare, or at least look at the Cliff's Notes, Lady Macbeth offers that the perceptual disturbance that her husband is enduring is due to a malady. She actually spoon feeds us that it's due to an underlying medical condition. So Macbeth is delirious. And then following that, Lady Macbeth is seen, quote, sleepwalking, end quote, through the castle. And of all people, characters to witness and observe her sleepwalking, it's a physician. And the lines, and I don't have the passage for you, that are spoken by the physician show that this in fact is not a sleepwalking episode, but that Lady Macbeth too is delirious. So once you understand that, you understand that the tragedy of Macbeth is a fictional case of delirium. And I Heart Lady Macbeth serves as an acronym for all the potential causes or etiologies of delirium. So everybody take their pen out. I Heart Lady Macbeth. Number 1, immunologic causes. Okay. One example certainly could be an exacerbation of SLE. Another example that you probably are going to hear discussed in the context of a CL rotation is anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis or encephalopathy. Number 2, heart, acute MI. Lady, L, lumbar puncture. You already got the A. I heard acute hypoxemia. Well, ABG is A. Of course, if your pulse ox is 99%, do not order the ABG. Right? D is drugs. You already named that one. Y is Yaws, Y-A-W-S. It's a spirochete infection. Right. Now, you're not going to order a Yaws titer in New Jersey. However, Yaws will get you to think of an RPR and HIV serology. Macbeth, M, malignancy. A, ammonia. So rule out hepatic encephalopathy. You already have 2 of the 3 C's. I heard CBC and I heard comprehensive metabolic panel. The third and final C is ceruloplasmin. By the way, for a CBC, you're thinking infection, always consider the UA as part of that. B, B vitamin deficiency. Highest yield, B12. Intermediate to low yield, folic acid. And then also consider thiamine, which is B1, especially higher yield in any patient that you are concerned about a history of alcohol use disorder or heavy drinking. E, EEG. I already heard TSH. The other T is trauma. And H, hypertensive encephalopathy. H also stands for head CT or MRI. And finally, H also stands for heavy metal poisoning. So for our character, I'm thinking that a Chem 1 is going to be high yield for us, in as much as severe dehydration and probably resulting hypernatremia is resulting in Clark-Griswold's delirium. Questions about delirium? So when you come into work on Monday and you are seeing a patient that you diagnose with delirium, an acute onset and fluctuating course of cognitive deficits, for which you believe there's an underlying medical condition, and your attending asks what you want to do next in terms of working up for potential etiologies, you do not tell them, I heard Lady Macbeth. Way too much here. So first, always think ABCs. When in doubt, it's your ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, circulation. So stat EKG. ABG / rule out hypoxemia. And then vital signs to rule out hypertensive encephalopathy. When you go through your ABCs, step 2, if everything comes back completely normal, does not reveal a potential etiology, always consider step 2, the impact of drugs. There are 2 substance withdrawal states that can lead to autonomic instability and therefore patient death. What are they?
Alcohol. That's over.
Good. Alcohol and sedative hypnotics. Always relate the impact of drugs. When you investigate, and this includes reviewing the patient's medication list as well, side effects / intoxication. When you do that investigation and drugs have, or the impact of drugs have been ruled out, step 3 is usually referred to as your routine lab assessment, which would include the following: CBC, CMP, UA, folic acid, TSH, RPR, and HIV. When all those results come back normal, next step, head CT or MRI, depending on where you think the lesion may be. EEG. Ammonia level. When they all come back normal. Now the normal here, EEG, diffuse background slowing, is nonspecific and is consistent with encephalopathy. So if you see that, doesn't really help much. It supports, if not confirms, delirium as a diagnosis. Certainly supportive, but it doesn't give you any hints of etiology. Seizure would, of course, but the diffuse background slowing is nonspecific. So if these tests come back normal, then step 5, that 5th and final step, is everything else within I Heart Lady Macbeth. Now, this 5-step progression of how to work up delirium assumes that the history and physical do not point you to a specific cause. Because obviously if it does, that's exactly what you're going to investigate. It's when the H&P is equivocal, gives no hints as to what the potential etiology is, that you go through this sequential stepwise workup and evaluation. Questions? All right, we'll leave the treatment and management either later today or at some later date. All right, but I want to definitely cover that as part of our discussion of vacation.
That's just a quick question. Why check the ammonia level with step 4 instead of step 3 when you're doing marshmallow?
Lower yield. And for ammonia level, there is really no relationship between the elevated ammonia and hepatic encephalopathy. So more times than not, it's a clinical decision. And in cases, the way I presented this, when the patient's clinical presentation does not support you looking for it, it's relegated to step 5. That's just the way it works out. If the patient has a history of alcohol use disorder, it's going to be the first thing you do, right? But when everything is blank and you have to start at square one, we usually don't get it until after all of the above have been checked. Now, if along with the along with the CBC, CMP, etc., I said step 5 and step 4. Along with the CBC, CMP, etc., if you decide to get ammonia level, is there an attending that's going to tell you that, listen, I'm sorry, but take off your white coat, you're out of here? Yeah. Right? Similarly, if some attending says it and you say, nope, I'm not going to do it because Toby, you told me not to. Nope. Right? These are relatively arbitrary and just from my experience. Right? There's no real medical literature that's going to stand by this in any fixed or rigid way. So the bottom line is that if you want to get it earlier, I would ask you to support that. And if you said I can't, I'm still going to allow you to get it anyway. Right. All right. Moving on, well, any last observations on Clark Griswold?
Are we not going to talk about how he like strapped the dog to the back of the car and just drove?
Or the grandma?
Or yeah.
Or the great aunt.
Yeah.
I'm like confused too. Am I like missing something because of the time that this movie was released? Like it was listed as a comedy. Like
It was
it
funny.
wasn't funny.
It was kind of funny.
The dog.
It wasn't a bad comedy, but. Or the incest.
Oh yeah, are we not gonna talk about that either?
That was weird. That was just one line. And we just never talked about it again.
Yeah, that was an odd line.
Yeah.
Especially in the way this franchise took off, and his cousin is a recurring character. Yeah, I think that's one. If the editors can go back and rethink, they would have probably.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Yeah.
is there movies following this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's at least 3, right? I mean, you've never seen Christmas Vacation?
No, we should have watched the trailer first. We just like went in blind.
That's fine.
That's the best way to go.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think to start out, his doing what he does to the dog and then his Aunt Edna is consistent with that egocentrism we talked about. He is so self-absorbed, and perhaps maybe because of his manic episode, or at least rule out mania, there's this goal-directed activity that he misses things, right? So I don't know if there's anything, at least provisionally, there's anything going on that would explain that observation beyond what we already discussed. Now again, there have been 4 total movies: Christmas Vacation, European Vacation, and I think Las Vegas Vacation. Which I would not recommend. The other 2, yes, definitely, but not number 4. Now, Christmas Vacation should absolutely be seen between December 1st and December 25th. Absolutely. That said, we don't have any movies, any other production that is a prequel. So we just don't know his history. We can't really piecemeal together what a young Clark Griswold was like. No, and Netflix should definitely tackle this, but otherwise we just don't get it. We just don't have that information. So if outside of the context of what we're seeing, which may be mania, which may be a manic episode, these behaviors persisted, there's something else going on. We just don't have that information, but certainly I think during a clinical interview we'd ask, we'd inquire. I just didn't know. So, a pretty fun, if not funny, film short, if you were going to publish something on YouTube, would be Clark, prior to going on that trip, refilling his prescription of valproic acid, taking it, and then just deciding, I don't want to go on this trip, it's a bad idea, and end of movie. That's the way Vacation would have ended if, in fact, a psychiatrist were written into the script. So, just food for thought for a future YouTube video. Any other characters you want to discuss in Vacation?
What?
So, Ellen?
Yes. Pretty so personality disorder, I think maybe dependent.
I think she's dependent.
Yeah.
So what is dependent personality disorder?
When you like fear abandonment and you become like submissive. And I think that it was kind of shown when he found her, I don't consider it cheating, but in the pool with the model, and instead of her being upset and saying like I'm not telling you tonight, she did the same thing that the model did in order to like grab his attention and say, hey, like, you know, I can be fun and wild too.
Dependent personality is one of those personality disorders that we would reorganize into that first column that adheres to a cardinal trait where the individual needs constant affirmation and reassurance for their every next step. Okay. Then review the diagnostic criteria. Again, I think you need 5 total. And they just morph into examples of the above. Do we see Ellen requiring Clark or anybody else's reassurance to take her every next step. Yeah, I'm not.
I would argue it's just the experience of like a woman in a bad relationship with kids, and you got to look out for the kids so she sticks around. Because at the end she said like, well, I mean, there's more movies, so obviously she stays, but she was like, I think your dad's going away after this. Like, she seemed to understand that the situation was more intense, but to me it just seemed like she was submissive out of like requirement to live in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think submissive is a relative term here, and I wouldn't use it in a clinical sense. I don't see it consistent with dependent personality in this particular character because she doesn't strike me as having that cardinal feature. She just doesn't. And therefore, I'm not sure she has any true mental illness. I just think these are state behaviors. That is, they're as a result of what's going on in her life. And I think we'd leave it there, to be honest with you. Any others? Did anybody get this morning's clues? Where's our what team is up for 4 points?
Our team.
Oh, yeah.
Answer.
Oh no, you have an answer.
Yeah, my guess was the Joker, but I don't know if that's what it is.
The Joker is incorrect. So it's actually the cousin from this movie.
The young man.
No. I'm blanking on his name now. The character played by Randy Quaid.
Who was
Eddie
asking for money?
Johnson.
Yeah.
Eddie, cousin Eddie, right?
Oh, yeah. There were a lot.
We didn't do it during our run. Is that what you guys are confused?
Yes.
Yeah, no. It's only half the students got a question pinned to them. Yeah, that's why I want to just close the book on this morning as well.
Yeah.
Any final observations? Any questions about delirium? Or anything else we talked about? We're good. All right.
Just a question about the movie in general. Did the editors and stuff like that create this movie trying to show examples of different disorders?
Absolutely not. No way.
Oh, okay.
Now listen, I say with full disclosure, I did not talk to any of the writers and producers of this movie, and even if I tried, none of them are going to talk to me. But I think I can very comfortably answer that question. No. And that'll be very consistent with a lot of the movies that we assign, watch, and discuss over the next 5 weeks. And that is, every movie that we're going to choose has been made for commercial purposes, not educational. It's this group's task to turn it educational and keep it educational, so that we can prepare for not only what we're about to see clinically, but of course testing that final Friday of your rotation on the shelf. That's the whole goal. All right, we'll sign off there.